Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshvarimati ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai. We'll continue on with chapter 19 from the Devi Bhagavatam, retold by Ramesh, Menon. Vyasa continued. When Tamra was struck unconscious, Mahisa's roar threatened to rive the very fabric of time. He struck the earth with his mace, and the sun and moon shuddered, bellowing like 1,000 wild buffaloes. That Asura emperor rushed at the king of the Devas. He struck Indra a blow on the arm with his gada, so that the Deva nearly fell off Aravata's back. But in a flash, the 1,000-eyed Indra smashed that mace into dust with his thunderbolt. Roaring Mahisa drew his scimitar, shining like a shard of sun, and rushed at Indra again. Such a battle they fought, the king of heaven and the master of darkness, their roars shaking the firmament. Then the demon began to fight with sorcery. He cast the Samvari Maya to spread an illusion over the battlefield. In a trice, 100,000 white buffalo warriors appeared and fell in the host of light from every side. Indra trembled. He hardly knew what to do. Varuna, Kubera, Yama, Agni, Yosoma, Surya, and all the rest fled. Stilling the terror that plunged through his blood with meditation, Indra prayed fervently to the blessed Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. In a moment, the darkness the buffalo legions brought to the field was dispelled in luminance as the three great gods appeared mounted on a swan, an eagle, and a huge bull, their weapons blinding in their hands. As he flew into battle, blue Vishnu cast the Sudarsana chakra on Mahisa's Mayak legions, and the army of buffaloes vanished in a week. But Mahisha was not in the least perturbed. Lowing louder than ever, he rushed at Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva with the massive occult paraka in his hand, the head of the mace glinting like an iron planet. Around that immense demon, grown big as a mountain, swarmed his generals, hardly less terrible than him. Chikasura, Ugrasya, Ugravirya, Asaloma, Trinentra, Vaskala, and many more. Some were lean and sinister, others immense and brawny. Some had 2 and 3 heads and were horribly misshapen. Others had just one glaring eye in his face, and still others 3 or 4 eyes. Some had no eye at all, yet they were not blind. Some of these monstrous warriors had flown to Mahisa from the ends of the earth, others from worlds deep in the sky, and others from the 7th and 8th deepest Patala. As a hunt of tigers may set upon a herd of cows, so the Asuras attacked the Devas. The sky was darkness of arrows, some plain, others wizardly of light and fire. The air was a hoarseness of roars and screams. Devilish Andaka, perhaps the most fell of all Mahisa's commanders, shot Harinarayana, Lord Vishnu, with 5 sizzling shafts, their points dipped in serpent venom. But with transcendent archery, Vishnu sliced them into slivers, even as they flew at him. Then these two assailed each other with a barrage of the most exceptional weapons, arrows and swords, humming chakras, whining masalas, black gadas, scintillating shaktis, and many more. For 50 days they fought without pausing, and neither could subdue his adversary. Meanwhile, Indra and the loathsome Vaskala fought, and that demon's breath was fire. Yama, who is death, fought three-eyed Trinetra, who battled him with a space of weapons he loosed from 6 hands. Mahahanu, a most beautiful demon, dueled with Kubera, and every now and then the Asura would seize some common soldier, a Yaksha or a Gandharva elf from Kubera's army, strike off his head, and then swill all the blood from his body in a long drought from the gaping throat. Varuna fought the pale quicksilver Esiloma with marine sorceries. And Mahisha himself battled Rudra, Lord Shiva, often locking interminable horns with Shiva's frothing mount Nandishvara. Suddenly, Mahisa cast his gleaming mace at Garuda, taking him in the chest so that the blood suffused his eagle's eyes, the ferocity of the blow. Keening in anger and agony, Garuda fell down to the ground and sat with his feathers quivering. Vishnu consoled him, stroking his golden plumage, whispering tender comfort into his ear. Then Vishnu rose again in fury and loosed a clutch of blazing arrows at Andhaka. But in the space of a wish, Andhaka raised a veil of Maya before him that Vishnu's shafts could not pierce. His rage mounting, Vishnu cast the Sudarsana chakra once more, flaming like 1,000 suns at the demon. But Andhaka spun his own chakra at it, a wheel of abysmal darkness, deep as the void, and the Sudarsana was tamed. Andhaka's triumph roar shook earth and sky. The Devas were deafened, and fled in all directions. Beside himself now, Vishnu seized up his mace of power and flew at the Asuras. He fetched Andhaka a blow like a thunderclap of the apocalypse, and that demon fell unconscious. Seeing his warrior fall, Mahisa sprang at Vishnu, who pulled on his bowstring till the planets quivered in their orbits. He covered the great demon in a golden cloud of arrows from that syringa. But the invincible Mahisa erupted from that deadly mantle and struck the blue god Vishnu on his blessed head with his iron parika. Vishnu fell like a great tree struck by lightning. In a wink, Garuda flashed up, set the fallen god on his back, and flew out of the battle quicker than sight. Indra and his devas were panic-stricken, and then their cries filled the air. Shiva flew at Mahisa and struck him in the chest, wide as a city, with 3 fires from his relucent trishula. But Mahisa only laughed, as if the triune infernos that could swallow galaxies only tickled him. He materialized a dark Shakti in his hand, like a dreadful curse, and cast it at Shiva. A black thunderbolt, the sorceress, struck that bull-mounted god. It would have incarcerated the moon, but it fell away in a shower of sparks against Shiva's fair chest. Now Vishnu recovered and flew back into battle. When he saw those 2 great gods standing side by side, Mahisha's roar eclipsed every sound yet heard on the tremendous field. In a moment, he had become a black bull buffalo, his horns long as streaks of lightning, his body big as a continent. He stood pawing the ground, tossing his horns, his coarse tail flicking from side to side behind him. The earth trembled under his hoofs and quaked when he raised his black face and bellowed. Then that incredible beast tore up some mountains with his horns carved like sides of suns and cast them down on Shiva and Vishnu. Shiva and Vishnu were blurs. With imperial archery, they smashed the peaks the buffalo demon cast at them into dust. That dust drifted out on the spinning winds, deep into the cosmic space, and in time formed itself into world nebulae. Shiva and Vishnu covered the snorting beast in clouds of fire, but he tossed his head and was proof against their fiercest volleys. In despair, Vishnu hurled the Sudarsana at him again. In his buffalo shape, Mahisa was not quick enough to stop that chakra with his own wheel of night. Vishnu's felled the demon. But in a moment, the demon sprang up again, now in a human form once more, his body glowing like a black sun, his cudgel luminous in his hand, and his growls like the rumbling of Avartaka and Pushkara, the storm clouds of the end of time. Hearing him, Vishnu raised his sea conch, the splendid Janya, to his lips and blew a blast that made the Asura army quail, and the Devas and the Rishis of heaven. The Chanaras, Kanaras, and Gandharvas, and all the hosts of lights cried out in exhilaration. When Mahisha saw his macabre legion struck with fear, he turned himself into a gigantic lion, big as a hill. The roars of the beast drowned every other sound that had been heard before on that field. Now the tide of fear was turned back, and the Devas shivered. With the loudest roar of all, Mahisa, the lion, sprang at Garuda and raked him with his claws long as an elephant's tusk, and he was covered in blood. Next moment, as Garuda floundered, Mahisa lacerated Vishnu's arm with a blow of his talons. Vishnu cast the Sudarsana again at the monstrous lion in an eruption of light. At once the Asura was a buffalo again and gored Vishnu deep in his chest with interminable horns. Twin fountains of blood sprayed from Vishnu's breast, and staunching them as best he could, dazed at the demon's primeval ferocity, Garuda and Vishnu flew blindly from the battle back to Vaikuntha. Seeing Vishnu flee, and seeing that Mahisa was indomitable, Shiva flew back to pearly Kailash. Brahma, who had blessed the Asura with the strange boon, fled before both of them. But the Devas remained steadfast and still faced the demon's ominous army. Indra, Varuna, Kubera, Surya, Sama, Agni, Vayu, and their legions stood firm, powerful weapons gleaming in their hands. When the three great gods fled, the Asura charged wildly at the Deva hosts, roaring like 10 forest bulls, full of. As they came to eerie spate, they covered the army of light with screaming narachas, like serpent spitting fire. A terrific conflict ensued, and at the heart of it all, killing 1,000 Deva soldiers every moment, was Mahisa himself, Lord of Darkness, the great black buffalo. Mahisa ruled that ancient field of war. Growing big as clouds, he would rip the peaks off more mountains and crush whole legions of Gandharvas under them. And then the jubilant roaring of the demon army was like that of a thunderstorm at the end of time. At other times, Mahisa would lash 1,000 Deva archers with his sweeping tail and strike their heads off, for that tail could be sharp as a sword when the demon wielded it. Then he would explode on Indra's hapless army in a thunder of razor-like hoofs, and only shreds of soldiers remained in streaming piles to show that glorious fighting men and elves had stood before the savage demon. 100 years the great war lasted, and Mahisa shone like a black sun on time. Now seeing him like that, invincible to every weapon they cast at him, panic seized the Devas and the Gandharvas and all the warriors of heaven. Indra leapt off, 4 tusks flying Arbata's back in terror, and bolted from the battle. Suryadeva jumped off his luminous steed, Ucharavas, who goes swift as thought, and ran. Quick as light, Mahisa seized the 2 superb beasts, both once churned up from the Sagara ocean for himself, and then there was no stopping the Devas anymore. Varuna, Yama, Soma, Kubera, Agni, Vayu, and all the rest fled in every direction, their wails of terror drowning the Asuras' celebratory roars. Their roars and crude songs echoing in heaven and on earth, their matchless Lord at their head, Mahisa's army flowed like a bloody river into the city of Amravati, which the routed Devas had abandoned. But the delectable Deva woman waited there, trembling for the inexorable demons. For now great Mahesura would sit upon Indra's crystal throne in the Sudharma. His dreadful generals would sit around him and wield power over the 3 worlds. And the beautiful Deva woman, the Gandharvas, and all the rest would lie in the coarse and insatiable demons' beds. The vanquished Devas and their people hid in the wilderness, in the hearts of impenetrable forests, in lofty caves, on unclimbable mountains, like beggars in the world. The Asuras ruled the 3 realms for an age, and darkness was his way. At last, in despair, the Devas arrived in Brahmaloka and prostrated themselves before the 4-faced Creator on his lotus throne, surrounded by the Munis of heaven. Narada, Kasyapya, Pulaha, Mirhi, and the rest, and by all manners of Gandharvas, Siddhas, Chanaras, Kanaras, Nagas. Indra and his people utilized the Brahma handsomely. Then Indra said, "Merciful Lord, don't you see us in our evil time, the Devas of light going like filthy beggars? Mahisa sits upon the throne in Amravati, and the 3 worlds suffer his dreadful rule. Time itself is corrupted, and yet, Brahma, you are indifferent to our anguish. The Asuras enjoy all that is ours. Why are women even? Help us, Brahma. We beg you to do something to save us." Brahma's face softened in compassion. He sighed and said, "Devas, what can I do? My heart is with you, for you have lost all that is rightfully yours, and indeed creation is plunged in sin. But Mahisa is invincible, Indra. He has my boon that no man can kill him. Perhaps we should go to Rudra, Lord Shiva, upon Kailash, and seek his help, and then to Vishnu in Vaikuntha as well." So the Devas and their Vimanas and Brahma on his vehicle, they flew to the lovely mountain that stood north of the Himalayas, risen like a full moon upon the earth. Shiva had divined their arrival and came out of his lofty cave to meet them, with Uma at his side. There was such grace upon all creation when Brahma and Rudra embraced each other at the mouth of that legendary cave. Then the Devas bowed to the eternal ascetic, the Mahayogin, Lord Shiva, and took the subtle Paduli dust from his feet. When they sat inside, Shiva said, Brahma, how have you graced Kailash today with your presence, O Devas? Brahma said, Deva, Mahisa has scattered these lords of light like straws in a gale. They roam the world, homeless and hunted. The offerings from every yagya on earth now go to the asuras, and evil holds creation in the grip of its claw. Lord Shiva, we have come to you for your help. How can the Devas be rid of Mahasura? Shiva smiled at this and said, Brahma, it was you who gave Mahisa his boon. Indeed, you are the root of all that has happened. He can only be killed by a woman, but where shall we find a woman to vanquish this demon who crushed us all in battle? Can Uma or Saraswati go to war? I think not. And even if they do, will they prevail? Who has ever fought a battle in their lives? Who has never fought a battle in their lives? Or will Mahisa drink their blood? Indrasachi, too, is no warrior. He saw the despair on the Deva's face and fell silent. Then he said softly, Vishnu is the intelligent one, the savior. Let us go to Vaikuntha and ask him what we should do now. As soon as Shiva spoke, a strange surge of hope coursed through the mountain, through the Devas and Brahma. Eagerly, Indra and his people cried, Let us go to Vishnu. We will find a way. All around them, they saw auspicious omens. A fragrant wind swept sacred Kailash, laden with exquisite scents of heaven. The sky was clear and all the quarters bright. The birds broke out into song everywhere in the divine energy, said Vedavyasa. We'll go on with chapter 20. Vyasa Muni continued. Brahma and Vishnu and the host of the Devas arrived in Vaikuntha, city of visions. O king, who can describe the beauty of Vishnu's city? It is beyond words, yet one can say that there are lustrous palaces and mansions here, great gardens full of enchantment, some with lotus pools set in them like precious mirrors. These pools are overgrown with supernal beautiful flowers with stems, have tiny jewels like dewdrops encrusted in them. Their colors defy the rainbow. Charmed rivers flow through this beautiful area. There are lakes here like small island seas on which water birds out of vivid dreams swim and set up wild symphony of sweet songs. Bright deer and peacocks amble through the shady groves, some of the birds with shimmering fans unfurled and some incandescent than any displayed by their cousins on the earth. At the heart of the magic city stood a crystal palace. This is where Vishnu lived. In the sabha of that mythic palace was a throne wrought entirely from the precious jewels mined on the world scattered across the vaults of space. Upon the throne, Vishnu sat, the dark blue and entirely beautiful god. His Parasatas, Sunata, Nandana, and the others were around him, so absorbed in his grace that they saw him everywhere, and in all things, him and nothing else. When Brahma, Vishnu, and the Devas arrived with their train of Gandharvas, Siddhas, Kinnaras, and others, they were met at the lofty gates of Vishnu Palace by the Dwarpalakas, Jaya and Vijaya, legends in their own right, with golden staffs in their hands. Indra said to those splendid gatekeepers, Friends, tell your Lord that Shiva and Brahma and the Devas have come to see him. Vijaya went to his master and said, Lord Brahma and Shiva have come to Vaikuntha with Indra and his host. Vishnu rose at once and came out to receive his illustrious visitors. They stood careworn at his gates, but the very sight of him seemed to restore them, as he The blue savior moved affectionately among them, taking their hands and embracing them fondly. The Devas praised him fervently, for he was their protector through the deep ages, the God who saved them time and time again from one great asura or the other. Vishnu led them into the sabha, and there with two thrones set there for one for Shiva and one for Brahma, where only they ever sat. There were also lesser thrones for Indra and his devas, many times more magnificent than any throne on the earth. When they were comfortably seated, Indra said, "Vishnu, you are our last refuge, and we come to you in despair." Vishnu said, smiling, "What grieves you, devas, that you have brought Brahman Vishnu to Vaikuntha?" Indra moaned, "Maheswara rules heaven and earth, my lord, and he torments us. We are like beasts in the woods, hiding from this demon's hunters, while he enjoys all the offerings from every yagya in the world. He tyrannizes creation, and time flows darkly for his power. No man can kill the asura, for that is Brahma's boon to him. We beg you, Vishnu, deliver us from Mahisa. Find us a woman strong enough to slay him." Vishnu said musingly, "We all fought him together, but he was invincible. It is true, only a Devi can kill Mahisa, but who shall it be? Perhaps if all of us combine our Shaktis to create such a Devi, she will be equal to the task." He had hardly finished saying this when the strangest thing happened. From Brahma's frontal face, from his brow, there issued a fiery light pulsating. In a moment it had flown out in a great flame and stood burning before them. Ruddy as rubies, a great hot and little cool. A brilliant asura surrounded Brahma's Shakti, embodied feminine fire. As soon as this manifestation was complete, Shiva's Shakti issued from his brow, and she was silvery, dazzling, and so fierce that none of the Devas could even look at her. When that candescent Shakti was fully extruded, Vishnu's sublime Shakti flowed from him, blue as the hearts of rainbows. The luminous flame was iridescent with spectral colors as she stood glowing at the sabha. The three Shaktis of Rajas and Tamas and Sattva stood waiting before the council of gods. Then, one by one, all the Devas emitted their Shaktis there, all brilliant, all fierce, and soon 18 pristine spirit flames burned in that sabha. As the Devas and the Trimurti watched, even they awed. Their Shaktis flowed together at the heart of that august and ancient chamber into a single ineffable flame whose tongue licked the lofty ceiling. Why, the very sabha and Vaikuntha itself seemed to vanish for the brightness of that great female fire. It was a mountainous Himalayan with 1,000 peaks dancing. Shading their eyes, the gods gazed at this fire, which once had fused into a single blaze, began to lick together into a wondrous form. In awe, the Devas saw that a brilliant goddess was being born from it, and she was so beautiful that she defied beauty itself. It was the Devi, Mahamaya herself, and she stepped from that Agni tall as the sky, with 18 arms in its manifestations, though it is told that she had 1,000 arms in her other cosmic form. Her face was white, her eyes black, her lips were scarlet, and the palms of her fresh, soft hands were coppery. She wore ornaments that took even the gods' breaths away, and in each of her 18 hands she carried a different dreadful weapon given to her by the gods. The Muni told this tale so well that King Janamejaya could almost feel the heat of the Shakti fire and reach out and touch that apparition. Her presence was so real. But the king said to Vedavyasa, "Please don't stop now, Holy One. Your tale is Amrit to me. I beg you, go on." Vyasa resumed solemnly, "The Devi is Nirguna, O king. She is formless, ubiquitous, eternal. Yet even as an actor assumes different roles to please his audience, the Devi assumes different forms in time to see Dharma done. When she stepped out from that Shakti fire of the gods, her face was white as a lotus and fierce. This part of her was from Shiva Shakti. Her hair was black as the night of space when no sun burns, yet it was luminous. Her hair was formed of Yama, the Lord of Death Shakti. Her 3 eyes were of Agni Shakti, fierce and reddish. Her brows were black and arched like Kama's bows. They were born of the spirits of dawn and dusk, and he seemed to cast coolness down on burning eyes. Her perfect ears were the flames of Vayu, and her slim nose was fashioned by the femininity of Kubara, the Lord of Wealth. It was fine as the till flower. Her teeth were like kunda flowers and were wrought from Daksha Pachapati's Shakti. Her lower lip was half a flame, made from the Shakti of Aruna. The son Swarthi, the upper half, was from Kartikeya, Shiva's son. Vishnu's Tejas flowed into her 18 weapons, bearing hands, and their 18 scarlet nails were from the Shakti of the Vasus. She transformed the fire of all the Deva Shaktis for her body and stood dazzling before the gods in Vaikuntha. Vishnu was the first to regain enough composure to speak. He said softly, "Devas, give all of your weapons to the Devi. She will have use for them against Mahisa." Like gods in a dream, the Devas went humbly to her, who stood in that sabha like another sun risen in the mist, a sun like no other in all the heavens. And they gave them all the various beautiful jewels and necklaces and all of their weapons. Regally, that Devi climbed astride her beast, and the creature's roar of joy reverberated throughout creation. Now Vishnu extruded a second calasant chakra from his Sudarsana, a wheel of fusive fire that could slough off any asura's grisly head, and brought it to the Devi. She took it from him with one of her hands. From Shiva's trishul sprang another glittering trident that would spew triune starfire 1,000 yojanas away. And the Mahayogan brought it to the terrific Devi. Smiling, she took it from him. Varuna wrought another deep conch from his primordial ocean sea conch and offered it to the Devi. Wind's offering was a shining bow, more powerful than any other. Every time that bowstring was drawn back, it made a noise like 10 tempests. Indra himself caused another 1,000-jointed Vajra to appear from his own thunderbolt and gave it worshipfully to her. He then gave her the golden bell from around his white elephant's neck to fasten around the throat of her golden lion. Yama made another staff from his danda that reaps the lives of all beings when their time is over, and she received it in a perfect hand. Varuna brought her a fluid pasa, a noose of water, as deadly as any weapon she had yet been given, for it could choke life from any being in a moment. Brahma gave her a kamandalu filled with holy water from the Ganga. Kala, time, offering was an axe that glinted like a mirror in the soul. and Vishvakarma, a parasu, so exquisitely wrought that she smiled to receive it. It was such a work of art that one might hesitate to put it to the savage use for which it was meant. Surya the sun gave a gift of his own light to the Devi, and she shone brighter than ever. And when she now stood before them, armed and bearing all their offerings in her many hands, they were overwhelmed and began to praise her, for she was indeed the Mahamaya, the great enchantress of the universe. They chanted many of her endless names. Salutations, O Shivaya, most auspicious Devi. Thou art peace and nurture, gentle Bhagavati, and thou art Rudrani, terrible one. We worship you, O Kalratri, night of the end of the world, O unborn mother of all things, great and small. Jagat Mata, the Asura Mahisa, torments us, and only you can kill him. We beg you, Mahamaya, deliver us from this demon. And they fell at her feet in tears. She laughed gently, and that sound sent a thrill of bliss coursing through them. The Devi spoke for the first time since she had appeared from the Shakti flames. This is amazing that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Indra, and all the Devas stand before me trembling for fear of a mere demon. Surely time is the only true God, for he brings sorrow and terror to the great and lifts the miserable to the loftiest thrones on creation. She paused to consider what she had said, and it seemed to amuse her, for she began to laugh. It was the strangest, most dreadful laughter. It was like roaring, and when the Devi threw back her head and laughed like this, the earth shook, the mountains trembled, and the sky quaked, and the seas rose to tidal waves and lashed their shores. Even golden Mount Meru, at the heart of the world, shuddered. But the Devas were delighted. They fell at the roaring Devi's feet, cried, Jaya, Vijaya, Bhava, be victorious. In Amravati, in the Devaloka, Mahisa heard the goddesses laughing and was angry. Who dared make such a noise when he, Mahisa, ruled heaven and earth? He sent his scouts abroad to discover what this weird thunder was. Bring me the devil who dares make such a noise. I will drink his blood. But then, who can this be? The Devas I have crushed, and they and their kind hide in the wilderness and terror me. No Asura would dare make such a terrible noise, for every demon in creation serves me. Go, find out who roars like this, and bring that villain back to me. His scouts flew from Devaloka, and it was not hard for them to trace the macabre laughter to its source. Soon Mahisa's men stood before the Devi Bhagavati, mounted on her fulvous beast, and oh, she was completely beautiful and entirely terrible as well. Thus they saw her carrying unearthly weapons in her many hands and quaffing wine repeatedly from Kubera's golden cup, until the scarlet stuff dribbled down her chin. Mahisa's demons took one look at the Lucific Devi. They couldn't bear the splendor and the fear of her, and they fled howling. They flew back to their master of darkness and said, Lord, it is a woman who makes that strange sound. She is neither human nor an Asuri, but she is exceptional and so beautiful that her beauty is the thing of terror. She is radiant, O Mahisa. She has many arms and carries a different weapon in each of them. She sits astride a golden lion, wears ornaments such as we have never dreamed of, and swills crimson wine from a precious goblet. She drinks endlessly, and then she laughs. The sound we hear is her laughter. O king, the Devas lie on their faces worshiping her, and they sing her praise devoutly. But she is so refulgent that we could not look at her for more than a moment, and we were seized with a dread worse than that of death. We fled back to you. We don't know how that strange woman is, nor what she intends. Mahisa rose from his throne and stalked Indra's golden sabha, the Sudharma, and he was both a great beast and an evil king. Some feverish passion seemed to have gripped him, some vast excitement. He gave a short bellow, and his deep eyes glowering, and a smile on his face, said, "Fetch her to me. At first, try to coax her here with soft words and priceless gifts. But if these gentleness fail, then bring her to me by force. But be careful, I do not want her harmed. Oh no, I want her for myself. I mean to make her my queen. For by her very laughter I can tell that she is fit for me, and for no one else. Fly, my friends, I cannot wait to see her, to hold her in my arms." And at that great buffalo's black loin, they saw the moist scarlet evidence of his lust. At once Mahisa's commanders mustered a legion of the boldest fighting Asuras and went to fetch that strange woman to their land. They went with elephants and horse chariot, flitting Vimana. By now the Devi had left Vaikuntha, and they found her in a secluded garden. Mahisa's generals saw her and were awestruck again. They could not bear to look at her for the mantle of brilliance that covered her. It was like gazing at a star from too near. From a safe distance, their leader spoke to her with utmost courtesy. "My master asked to you to come to him, lovely lady, whoever you are. My master, Mahisa, is the lord of the three worlds. He is invincible. No man can kill him. No Deva or Gandharva, Kinnara, Asura, or Rakshasa. For he has a boon from Brahma. My lord heard you laugh across the firmament and was enthralled. We described you to him, and he lost his heart to you. Devi, come with us to our master. He can be a man or a beast as he pleases, whatever you want him to be. O fawn-eyed one, come with us to our king." And Mahisha's generals fell silent. Here, Vedavyasa pauses. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.